now is one of the leading states, bar none, on child protection. So Gail's done phenomenal work there. And I also really like being in front of people who might remember morality in media. So my organization, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, began life in 1962 as morality in media. And then that became like a dirty word. Like you couldn't get excellent meetings in DC under the banner of morality. But so the organization rebranded in 2015. And what was fascinating though is it used the science that proved exactly the things that morality and media always said for decades, that, for example, pornography is so harmful to the mind, and especially damaging to the young, developing plastic mind. These are all proven by science now. So the ethical positions that were taken by morality and media in the 60s and the 70s, and the 80s, all are just facts. So I'm focusing on protecting children from online predators, and I'll highlight one solution in particular, Kids Online Safety Act. I was with Senator Marsha Blackburn on Tuesday. She chaired a subcommittee hearing at Senate Judiciary in which two whistleblowers came forward from Meta, which is the owner of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and really is a devil in this. They do not care about kids. They don't test their products before launching them. You know, it almost contradicts our notion of American bedrock safety, is that the corporations test products before they launch them. Meta doesn't. And therefore they launched Meta's AI chatbot that will interact with children online, coach them, give them advice of various sorts. It's not a human being, and yet a child, especially a child, actually all human beings, will develop a human-like relationship with the bot. And these bots have now proven to lead kids into suicide. There's a case with Character AI that came out of Florida, and then there's a more recent case in Texas. So these are very disturbing developments, but what's most disturbing probably is that the products and the platforms are not tested at all. And I'll get into in this presentation why that is. But first, you know, we're not making this up. We're not alarmists. There is evidence of the increased harm online from predators from a number of sources. And the best is probably the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children, NCOMEC, which is a kind of public-private partnership. They get millions of dollars from the federal government, taxpayers are paying for NCOMEC, and it is the repository. Like if you come across child pornography anywhere while you're searching your computer, you're supposed to report that to NCOMEC. That is the only place where that material is supposed to be housed, pending law enforcement activity around finding out who's circulating it, right? But NCOMEC does a lot of research and they maintain cyber tip line data. So one shocking development between 2021 and 2023, there was an increase in grooming of children. Online enticement of children increased 323%. Now this is when adults approach kids, and what they do is, and sometimes they use pornography to try to groom the kids and then move them offline to WhatsApp, for example. So on the same Meta platforms, a child will encounter a stranger who's a predator on Facebook, and they tell them, oh, now download WhatsApp and move the conversation onto an encrypted platform where then they can be more explicit in what they're asking the child to do. So NCOMEC data is important to follow, and then there are some extremely good researchers. Thorn is one. It's dedicated to online research, and they found that more than 1 in 3 minors reported having had an online sexual interaction, and 1 in 4 kids, that's 28%, believe that they had that interaction with adults. So this is very common. And then BARC, which is a very good service that people have to pay for to be part of BARC, and that will give you notifications if there are suspicious activities on your child's phone. They found that the top dangerous platforms were Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, Facebook, and TikTok. So these are all platforms that we all know our kids and grandchildren are on for hours a day. another child safety researchers are Kennedy Barker are excellent. Corporate whistleblowers. So on Tuesday, the hearing at Senate Judiciary with two meta whistleblowers. One is the woman is the only expert, Ph.D. scientist, researcher, one woman who was in charge of following what was happening on VR, virtual reality. Remember Mark Zuckerberg introduced these Oculus glasses and you could experience virtual reality? Strangers are on those platforms and they are approaching kids with sexual intent to groom them, to harm them, and the child experiences, she in some detail described how a child feels, any human feels as though they are in real life being molested, and has the physical sensation as though it has happened in real life, because to the body, virtual reality is real reality. And she's the only expert. She brought to the attention of the C-suite that strangers were approaching kids at a very high rate, and pause, that the majority of people using the VR Oculus glasses were under 13. And Facebook's response was to prevent her from doing any more research. She has risked her career to come before the Senate and tell the world that. And to be honest, the hearing room was about twice the size of this room, and there were not many reporters. And that compares to maybe a year ago when I was in the same Senate Judiciary hearing with 5 CEOs of social media platforms, where it was a room of 20 times this size, and it was packed with media. And it's as though the interest in that subject of the utter indifference that a company like Meta has toward our kids is old news. But it can't be old news because nothing's changed, right? And then victims themselves and their lawyers are a source. James Marsh is someone who's prosecuted a lot of child pornography cases, and he had a case in which a 12-year-old, there used to be a platform called Omega. It marketed itself as putting you together with a stranger to create new relationships in chat rooms. Well, there was no age verification. So little kids who were going on this, and in the case that James Marsh was prosecuting, a 12-year-old is paired with a stranger that sexually molests her. And she develops profound psychological results of the interactions. He keeps telling her to come back to that chat room. And the case is so powerful, the company shut down. Omegle doesn't exist anymore. Basically over this case and a few others. So lawsuits are also very important in driving out the bad actors. But I'm going to highlight one of the most recent forms of abuse in which predators are gaining access to kids and causing ruinous harm, and that's sextortion. Sextortion has increased astronomically, according to the FBI. The FBI put out a warning in early 2024 on the increase, and the predators are soliciting nudes. So a predator pretends they're a 16-year-old girl and approaches a teen online and has enough information about the teen's high school and that teen's band activity or football activity, and entices that kid to sending a nude. Well, part of the problem, part of the problem here is the normalization of sexting is allowing kids to be trading these images faster. So the teen and the kids they're targeting are boys between the ages of 13 and 17. Boy produces the pic, sends it to the predator, who then announces, and now I will share this with your family and your school unless you give me $1,000. Most of these cases are financial extortion cases using the images to leverage the child. And in the case of Representative Brandon Duffy, a South Carolina state rep, very conservative, wonderful man, his 17-year-old child, he said goodnight to him, the family goes to sleep at 10 o'clock, and at 2 in the morning they hear a gun go off. The 17-year-old has taken his own life because he ran into predators who asked him for the pictures and then the extortion of $1,000. He didn't have $1,000. So Guffey was running for state rep at that time, and he told his wife, I'm not getting out of this race, I'm not going to do it. And so I said, no, we're going to dedicate ourselves to this fight. And he has passed, Gavin's law has passed, it increases the penalties and it increases resources to law enforcement. The US government extradited the Nigerian predators who caused that death
to the US, and they were prosecuted and they've been found guilty in South Carolina, in courts in South Carolina. So law enforcement is very well aware of this crime and the devastation.
Yeah.
That doesn't bring back Brandon Duffy's beautiful son, Gavin. It doesn't bring him back, right? And so increasing the resources to law enforcement is kind of a very, after the fact solution. We have to educate our kids about these harms and to never produce pictures for a stranger. Don't produce a picture for anybody you've ever met. The latest harms are the AI companion bots. The key is that all of us know instinctively why would these be so dangerous. Kids are forming unhealthy emotional attachments to non-humans. And very often, in the case where a chat GPT companion bot is coaching the child to tie knots in their closet, and it ends as it would end so tragically, the negative emotions are reinforced. So the bot keeps confirming, yes, you're right that you're being bullied by this other students and kids. Yeah, this is terrible. Yeah, your plan is a good one. You're so smart. That plan for ending your life is a good plan. Reinforcing the worst thoughts in the child. And then the attachment is so intense that it causes kids to separate from their own families and their real life kids, their real life friends. And there was no mental health experience in developing these AI companion bots. So there's no attention to the worst case scenarios of when bots are being consulted for assistance when a child is in pain or unhappy or frustrated or lost a girlfriend. The normal things that a good capitalist country, the person who's talking about capitalism versus crony capitalism, it's such a smart observation. A good company would be testing the heck out of these products before they launch them. They never do. They don't test. Why? Why don't they test? There's an explanation. It's the unintended consequence of a bill called the Communication Decency Act, Section 230. The sound is one that Ms. Phyllis Shapley would love, right? Communications Decency Act. I'm sure Equal Farm Help passed CDA back in the day. It was 1996. Probably helped pass it because it was about ending the supply of keeping kids away from pornographic material. That was the objective of the bill. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court concluded that it was too high of a barrier. This child protection bill created barriers against adults being able to access that darn it First Amendment right to pornography, which was found in the 70s, right? And so the Supreme Court is always holding on to the protection of the First Amendment, thank God. But on the other hand, in this case, pornography is protected over kids. So the whole bill was gutted, except for a provision, Section 230, which said it gave blanket immunity to these companies. And the companies were in their infancy in 1996, so they needed protection. So the Congress was about protecting the ability of a tech platform to remove, it was a good Samaritan provision, remove bad stuff and don't be held accountable for that bad stuff. And the analogy that makes sense, and I remember back in the 90s, this made sense to me, the highway. We don't blame the highway for drunk drivers, right? That's a different set from the drunk driver in a car, driving down the street. The highway is not to blame. That's how the World Wide Web is portrayed, just as a neutral avenue for commerce and communication. However, in the case of these social media platforms, they know everything about us. They're collecting data nonstop about us. They know who the kids are versus who the elderly people are. And they do nothing to protect the kids. And it's the CDA 230, this lack of liability, the blanket immunity provided to big tech has caused this utter irresponsibility. And so at the hearing on Tuesday, it was music to my ears that Senator Hawley and it was bipartisan, Senator Hawley from Missouri and Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut and Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota and Senator Blackburn all mentioned the problem of CDA 230 because it's blocking accountability. These two whistleblowers kept saying, our lawyers tell us it's a risk if we know about the harms on our platforms. That's like not even American, right? Our lawyers tell us to look the other way because if we don't see the harmful and the problematic functionality, we're not responsible, we're not legally responsible for it. It's absolutely perverse. It's not American. And we're working hard in Congress to try to change that.
It's really a depressing topic. But we had a win, victory. This past June, the court concluded in a case called Paxton, Free Speech versus Paxton, that the government has an abiding interest in protecting kids online. It's Net Choice versus Paxton. And that legitimate government interest to protect kids can mean that government can limit access to pornography. It stems from a case in Texas. The Texas legislature passed a law that said pornography platforms must verify the age of anybody using those platforms. Common sense. It passed in Texas, but its birthplace is Louisiana. And it was Representative Lori Schlegel, who's a therapist, a Republican therapist, and who was seeing these terrible cases of kids, young kids, addicted to pornography and it changing their behavior and their approach and their relationships with their family. She sponsored it. And sort of out of thin air, she said, the draft bill says, if a platform has over 33% of pornographic content on it, then this bill applies. And that was copy-pasted across the nation. 20 states passed age verification bills. It's the Texas one that went all the way up to the Supremes. I'm not sure why that is, because the first one was really Louisiana. The problem here is that this is relying on the NCOSE Law Center has several cases against pornography platforms like Pornhub and Xvideo. They're organized crime. Like, these are not legitimate good businesses. These are really bad actors. They often have roots in Cyprus with oligarchies and Russian mafia. Like, they're very bad actors, and the money feeds bad things. So we're relying on them to do age verification. It's a step, right? But it isn't getting to the real problem, which are these social media platforms. And we really are finding the creativity. Becky Garrettson is here. Alabama is one of the states that passed a very valuable solution. Actually had two bills, one for device safety. Device safety bills say there's a filter in this phone. iPhones and Android phones have filters buried inside them. They default to off. Why not just default them to on? Insist that these filters be on. So Alabama, Utah, of course, always the leader in this field. Utah and Alabama were the first two states to pass this bill. In Texas, fascinating, both that age verification bill was pending and this device filter bill was pending, and all the big tech lobbyists said, age verification, do age verification, don't do device filter, because they don't want to be told what to do. They never want to have their hands tied. They never want to be regulated. It's a non-regulated space. So they said, yeah, go with the age verification because it insists on pornography platforms. It passed, and we failed on device filter in Texas. But we passed it because of Becky Garrettson and her work in Alabama, absolute hero of Alabama. And what happened? This is amazing. Becky, I hope you know this. Apple has decided that in their newest version, they're putting out a new iPhone. It's the iPhone 26. It will have the filters automatically defaulting to on. And that is a direct outcome of these two states. Utah and Alabama have leveraged the power of Apple, right? And that's also why states' rights are so important. I mean, states' rights are gonna get us to the future. And meanwhile, Congress came 2 inches away from passing an AI moratorium that said for 10 years, AI cannot be regulated by the states. It came this close. Unfortunately, it was buried in the big, beautiful bill. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said, if I had known that AI ban on state regulation was in that bill, I wouldn't have voted for it. It went over to the Senate, and it came this close again. And thank God, Representative Blackburn, Marsha Blackburn, who had a compromise and said, okay, the compromise is going to be 5 years instead of 10 years. I'll do a 5-year ban. Our lawyers looked at it and said, this is even worse than the 10-year ban over on the House side. We informed her office, and within, how often do you see a politician do a 180-degree flip in 24 hours? Marsha Blackburn had the power, the courage, the moral courage to say, I made a mistake, and within 24 hours, she walked away from a compromise that she had agreed to, and at 4:30 in the morning, the bill was defeated. That amendment curtailing state regulation was defeated. It was, I don't want to get it wrong, but it was like 91 to 1. It was one person voted against it. It was 90, I'll look it up, but it's like 91 to 1 or 92 to 1. The whole Senate said no. We're not going to have a moratorium on state regulation of AI. We need to have the creativity of states addressing these harms. But it was because of the moral fortitude of one woman, one senator. She was brave enough to say, I made a mistake. And so you find what Utah and Alabama is forced the hand of Apple. Senator Marsha Blackburn forced the hand of the rest of the Senate. That's why we're in this room. It's our courage, our standing up for what's right and doing the things against the vape industry. That story was amazing, Gail. I mean, standing up against that darn industry was extraordinary. And so these things work. But you have to really be passionate and lose some evenings of entertainment and relaxation. There's a bill that a lot of people like, and it's very cool. App Store Accountability Act. And how am I doing for time? I have 5 more minutes?
Yes, 5 minutes.
App Store Accountability Act also is pending in Alabama. What it says is, you know who has all the control over these apps? The Apple App Store and the Android Play Store. That's where the kids get all of these platforms. And these are, the insight of this bill, it's brilliant, is terms of service. When you download an app, you agree to a terms of service. That's a contract. And a contract, since when do kids sign contracts with corporations? No, that's illegal. So this great insight, and it comes from really a man named Joel Thayer at the Digital Progress Institute. Joel said, why do we allow kids to sign contracts with companies? And then, sometimes you feel terrible stories about kids racking up debt because they're buying tokens or coins or prizes or crowns online with games that their parents then need to have to pay off. This bill says age verify at the App Store level. Nobody under 18 should be able to download anything without parental authority, without parental consent, and you can't do in-app purchases without parental consent. Bedrock common sense. It's been passed in, guess the state. Where's this been passed in? Utah.
Utah and Alabama.
Utah, App Store Accountability, Utah, and where else? We got it one more place, I thought. Louisiana, yeah, with Representative Schlegel's leadership and Kim Carver. So passed in 2 states, I think you're going to see this bill popping up. In Alabama,
It didn't pass last year, but it's coming back.
it's coming back. Alabama's got the fire. And so App Store Accountability Bill is a real smart common sense one. And we have model language that we can share with you. We work closely with a group called Digital Childhood Alliance that's great on this. Melissa McKay, got to be a friend of yours, Gail, from Utah, started that organization. So App Store Accountability Act is neat. We thoroughly believe in the no cell after bell, like restrictions on cell phones in schools. Most of these kids are getting the access to these apps on their cell phones, not on computers. And ed tech scrutiny, too many stories. Because we have a law center, we get calls every week about terrible cases in kids, especially accessing pornography on school devices. So that has to be addressed. Deb Simmons in Texas is very good on this. Getting to Kids Online Safety Act, it's again, Senator Blackburn's bill. It was passed by the Senate 91 to 3. That one I know. 91 to 3, it was passed in the Senate. But there wasn't enough time for the House to consider it. So we really believe it is the best solution because it doesn't touch CDA 230. It's still too political. Big tech is so powerful, and they invest in every campaign. They're spending $100 million in lobbying against this bill. Again, they don't want to be regulated. But it creates something which is legally actionable. It's a duty of care. It's like a hotel has a duty of care to its guests. That's why you have locked doors. Keys, guards, have to pass the front desk. That's a duty of care. So these social media platforms should have a duty of care, and that would center the child. They will have to start doing research before they launch these projects. They have to care about safety. So it's a smart solution to the problem of CDA 230. It requires that the safety settings be at the highest level, and it would cover like the Meta AI chatbot, which is... The Wall Street Journal found it engaging in sexually explicit chat with kids 8, 9, 10, 11. Like, just despicable stuff. And we have to compel corporate accountability. Like, I'm old enough to remember when you had a sense that companies cared about their employees, and cared about the people who use their products. That's gone. These big tech companies are all about the mega profits they make, and they're the most, billion-dollar companies. They're so wealthy, they could invest in safety, but their law firms tell them not. And then our kids, we just absolutely have to talk as early as possible about the risks with the kids. And bipartisan strategies are working. It's really we passed a bill called Take It Down Act. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas was a leader of that bill, but the First Lady got very involved. It passed faster because of First Lady Trump's involvement. And what it does is say non-consensual sexually explicit material that's uploaded, it has to be taken down in 48 hours if it's me and I contact the company and say, I don't want that out there. And it gets taken down. And they have to have actual real human beings to deal with, that the help desks are required with human beings so that we can give those notifications. Right now, NCOSE Law Center tries to take down this kind of non-consensual material. We only succeed 20% of the time because basically we're begging the platforms to take this non-consensual material down. So that is wrapping up. And I brought materials, but you don't want to be walking, you all have a lot to read and a lot of papers. I'm happy to send you go back home. We'll send you fact sheets or assets or talk to your legislatures with you. We find we're subject matter experts, and then we join you, constituents, and that's a powerful presentation to members of Congress and the state legislature, which we do all the time. So thank you so much.